there's two real challenges. One arises from just people being a little bit alienated, and I think that living in big cities, people become alienated not just from government but also from one another. And it's very easy to imagine, if you're an individual living in a very large city, that your voice doesn't make a difference, can't make a difference, because every day you're confronted with the fact that you are just one small person in a very big crowd. And I think that leads to a lack of a sense that anything that you contribute will in any way matter. So I think one of the real challenges for government is to overcome that, and part of that is around making it really clear that there is a real pathway from the individual's contribution to an outcome, and governments need to be very, very clear about what that pathway is. The second thing I think that is a challenge, and it is equally difficult, and these two things interrelate, are that the challenges that face cities and urban planners have become terribly complex. We're talking about very big systems, multiple systems interacting in complex ways. We're talking about very long time scales. And so governments need to be able to respond to the fact that their communities will need time and assistance to get the information that they need to participate properly in decision making. I think when we're talking about involving communities, there's a couple of things that governments should be particularly alert to. You need to be honest with your community and indeed with yourselves about how much power you are actually willing to give over the community on this particular question. In some instances, it may be that all you are doing is informing people, and if that is the case, then you need to be really clear about that, know it yourself and communicate it to the community. In other circumstances, it may be that you are willing to give over substantially more power. You may be asking the community to contribute to a decision, or in some instances, you may even be asking the community to make the decision. And I think that thinking carefully about what you are asking the community to do and being very clear about it with them is very important. It's important because it helps you design a process that is well suited to that task. But more importantly, it's about trust. If you tell the community that they are going to be doing one thing and then they end up doing something else, it's possible to raise expectations, and when those expectations are not met, it means that trust is broken and engaging them the next time becomes just so much more difficult. I think the second thing is, and I spoke about this earlier, is recognising that the community needs to skill up, particularly where they're dealing with complexity and complex questions. Thinking carefully about the kinds of resources that your community participants might need to make an informed decision is very important. I think that sometimes giving the community an opportunity to ask for more materials or for different sources of expertise, and actually empowering the community to think about what they need to make the decision, ask that of government, and being prepared to resource it can also be very effective. And I guess the third thing, and this is something that's really, I feel really passionate about, is that you shouldn't underestimate your community. So we're seeing some really interesting examples emerge globally where communities are given much more responsibility. We're moving well beyond simply informing them. We're moving well beyond asking them to simply make a contribution. In some instances, we're asking communities to make the decision. And some of your viewers, I think, will know about the participatory budgeting processes that have taken place, I think pioneered in cities like Porto Alegre in South America. We're seeing that rolled out in different places across the world, and I know that in the UK they've experimented with it and done some really interesting evaluations where when you give citizens a chance to get together, make some concrete decisions about how a portion of a government budget will be spent, you see some really interesting results. You know, not only do you get greater legitimacy for the spend, sometimes it seems to prompt councils or governments to collaborate more effectively internally once they realise what the citizens' priorities are. And in other instances, just bringing citizens together for this kind of process prompts new forms of citizen activity to emerge. So the fact that these citizens come together, deal with big public questions together, leads them to go off and do something quite separate from government, but contributing in really constructive ways to the community. And we've had one example, only one I think, in the Australian context, which is where I'm from. A local council got citizens together just to participate in an evaluation and make recommendations about council budget. And it's really surprising what citizens will come up with, you know, and in this instance, who knew that if you got a bunch of people together, they would recommend a rate increase or a tax increase? But in fact, having looked at council services, they came to the conclusion that A, they hadn't been aware of all of the services council was providing in the first instance. B, having become aware of it, they couldn't see any areas where they wanted council to stop providing that service, so they saw no obvious areas for council to wind back. And C, subject to council investigating opportunities to do some of their tasks more efficiently, they were happy to approve a rate increase of up to 10% to meet some of the financial and service delivery challenges that they now realise council was facing. And I tell that story because I think it's such an interesting example of how citizens, you shouldn't underestimate your citizens. They are thoughtful, intelligent, public-minded people, and they will often deliver really surprising and terrific results if you just give them the opportunity.